Good evening. It is May 1st, and we're meeting here in the Cardinal Room with the Education Committee meeting. I'm very excited today. We have 3 presentations, so there's lots to talk about today. And before we get started, first of all, welcome to everybody here, and those of you who are perhaps listening, if you haven't gone downstairs to the arts show yet, take some time if you have. There's some real cool stuff out there, and there are lots of other things going on in the district, but we'll leave that to others to mention today or at a later date. So with that said, Mr. Hoffman, do you have any announcements?
So I'll be brief this evening with the presentations we have. We've entered a month of assessments. We have our PSSAs. This is week 2 in our elementary and middle schools. Thank you to students, teachers, administrators, parents for preparing, supporting, and ensuring the hard work for our students. You may have seen on our website and social media that Upper Dublin High School was ranked 27 in the 2024 U.S. News and World Report. That's number 27 in Pennsylvania. Was just speaking about that, and looking back to, I was able to get back to 2019. We were 54 in 2019 in Pennsylvania, so 31 last year. So we're continuing to move forward, and congratulations to all involved in that. As Ms. Sherpier said, it's our 49th annual Allied Arts Show tonight. There are food trucks behind the building, so enjoy those and the beautiful artwork of our students from grades 4 through 12. And next week, we'll be honoring all of our UD employees for all that they do to make our schools the best. And so it's a superhero theme. We're going to be kicking off with a K-12 Spirit Day, dressed like a superhero. Administrators will be washing cars for our employees on Tuesday and Thursday, so staff, be on the lookout for those. And we have some other surprises planned along the way to just thank our amazing superheroes that keep our schools running every day. And that's all.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Next item are the minutes. I see members of the committee are here. Did you have a chance to review the minutes? I see yes. Dr. Thomas, yes. Then we'll move those on for information to the legislative meeting. All right, that then gets us to the presentations. First presentation is the curriculum review cycle textbook update recommendations.
So Ms. Vandergrift is going to be sharing 3 recommendations tonight. As per policy, let's make sure we're moving. As per our school policy 109 and our practice, we will be, as you know, the board must approve our recommendations for our instructional materials, our textbooks. Ms. Vandergrift will be sharing 3 recommendations with you this evening. These books will be on display through the June education and actually the June legislative meeting. If anybody wants to look at those, board will continue to bring those to our meetings as well so that you have those. And then we will formally bring a recommendation to you in June to move those forward. But Ms. Vandergrift?
Okay, the first book that we're recommending is a textbook for 8th grade social studies. And the title of that is My World Interactive American History, Beginnings to 1877. Last year, I'm not sure if you recall, but we adopted a new textbook and platform for 6th and 7th grade through National Geographic. Teachers are loving it, students are loving it. There's still a whole lot more to explore on that. Currently, there is not an 8th grade textbook. And based on our benchmarks and teacher observation and knowledge, there is a gap with informational text and the skills that our students need to be developing. The 8th grade curates its own materials, and we've designed and backwards designed the 8th grade social studies without that textbook, but they felt like it was a missing piece, so it's going to be a supplemental text and just a class set for students. And during the summer curriculum time, the teachers want to take time to work with that book, to integrate it into the curriculum in a way that it can be scaffolded and meet the needs of all students and address the skills that we know are lacking with our students or in our students. They landed on this book because it's very middle school. It's written specifically for middle school. It provides resources that are ELA friendly and really gets into the informational text language. It provides ideas around language of an inquiry and project-based learning, which is what we've been trying to shift a little bit more to within our curriculum. Also, the teacher said it's very accessible for students. So that's the main reason, one of the main, or some of the main reasons we landed on that book for a recommendation. The second book is AP Spanish, and it is Vista's Tomas. I practiced with a Spanish teacher today. And it means themes. It is actually the final book in the series of the Senderos from Vista, which we adopted last year, Spanish 1 through 4, with that platform. It's a platform that immerses the students into the language, provides so many bells and whistles, an amazing thing. Just so happened that they were revising the AP text last year, so we decided to wait until the new edition was being published. Also gave an opportunity for the teachers to explore the Senderos version, and it was a hit. So here we are, and so that includes 20 classroom sets plus the digital licenses. You can read this on your own time because we know we have a lot going on, but I collected lots of feedback from the Spanish teachers and the students on that. The next book and the final book, we are adding AP African American Studies, which is brand new to AP, and obviously our first year at Upper Dublin. So we are, again, it is a supplemental text because it is a document-based curriculum, but this is the text that we are recommending. Is a supplemental, and it's one that's recommended by the AP. And our curriculum leader, Jimmy Garner, and Mr. Blajan, who will be teaching the course, took a look at a few different, the two texts that AP had recommended, and they decided that this was a much more student-friendly, more accessible, aligns more to also the African American history course that is also offered at the high school. So as a classroom set, it can work for both courses.
All right.
There's your grand total.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. van der Grift. Are there any questions of the committee? One quick question. The African American Studies one, it's an estimated cost. Is that because?
I didn't switch the estimated. I had to update we originally had put in for 30, but based on our class size, we changed it to 20, and I got the new quote on Monday. So okay. That is the correct number.
Yes.
So.
All right. Thank you.
And next month, we will bring actual recommendations with the quotes attached to it.
Yes, and copies of all the books will be available for anybody to inspect, not just board members, members of the community, in the barn between now and the next meeting, right?
Yes, I have
and the
them ready to go,
farmhouse.
so I'll take
My
them over.
apologies. Yes. All right. Thank you. That then gets us to the next presentation, which is the update for the math pilot. We have a number of teachers who've been brave enough to pilot this here in our audience. So I'm excited for them to share their input, their observations, and Mr. Hoffman will start off the presentation.
Thank you, and thank you to our wonderful teachers who are here tonight. Many of them are listed here on this slide. For those of you that know or don't know, we did have a trial in 3 of our grades in 2 of our buildings for our elementary math. We had first grade at Thomas Fitzwater, second grade at Thomas Fitzwater, and third grade at Jarretttown. We also have our 2 STEM instructional specialists here with us tonight. A lot of the work that we'll be talking through this evening is also supported by the Elementary Math Committee that we have been sharing some of our work with you along the last several months. So terms that we spoke earlier in the year that I wanted to just begin our conversation with again tonight is remembering that curriculum itself is what the students learn in a course. So that includes our standards, our goals, and our objectives. So the book is not the curriculum. The standards, goals, and objectives are the curriculum. The curriculum resources are what the school provides to teachers and to students to support our implementation of that curriculum. And as you know, we have a system in place to review our curriculum, all K-12 curriculum resources, and all of our standards, goals, and objectives over a multi-year, a 5-year cycle. A new term that I want to highlight for this evening to really draw attention to is the term pilot. A pilot is when we introduce materials on a small scale, typically in a few schools, to test the feasibility before implementing on a larger scale. And so we're looking for two things primarily in a pilot. First, does the program meet the needs, the predetermined needs or goals that have caused us to undergo the pilot? Second, it provides, if the answer to that is yes, then it does provide us really valuable insights into any modifications that may need to be made, implementation challenges, so what was hard or difficult for us as a system or a teacher or a building to use, and the conditions that will support success in order to help us make determinations about those recommended next steps. So we've kept that kind of focus in mind as we've gone through the last several months, and we're here tonight to update you on that pilot. A unique aspect of what our pilot entailed as well is that we had what we referred to as trials, and the trials happened in every single classroom, in every single grade, in every one of our elementary schools. And that means that at least, Mr. Commissioner, you told me the other day, it was 3 or 4 minimum lessons. In most cases, it was a unit. Some couldn't stop because they were liking what they were seeing. But the unique thing about our pilot is while the people who are here with you tonight are going to share their experience building that math community over the entire course of the year, every classroom has been able to learn about illustrative math and actually try that with their students with the support of our instructional coaches and other supports across the district. Turn it over to Mr. Mishner and we will tag in here.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. As Mr. Hoffman has shared with you in prior presentations, and you've heard from me over the last couple of years, very quickly in our elementary math review, we recognized the need for vertical alignment. That certainly came from data in terms of standardized tests, achievement, and growth, but also from observational data and walkthroughs and conversations with teachers at all levels. What's working, what's not working, what do we need, and where do we go to get that? And so the question that we asked ourselves is, what do we believe about how kids learn? And wrong direction. So the math vision statement that we developed 2 years ago through a differentiated supervision project started us on that path. You know, we identified that student-centered classrooms with critical thinking and problem solving at their core were the direction we wanted to go. And as our pilot progressed through this year, through not only the teachers that were in the pilot classrooms for the full year, but also the trial lessons, we developed a math committee. So clicking on that. And that math committee worked to identify a little bit more. Dr. Muirhead, Dr. Faith Muirhead from the University of Delaware, who's our partner and friend in this work, quickly identified for us that our vision statement was great in terms of a general path, but it wasn't actionable. And so the committee worked really hard to update on best practices, reading current research on what does work in a math classroom. And so we ended up, if you wouldn't mind scrolling, Ms. Evans there, identifying kind of guiding statements for what it would look like to achieve that vision for students, for teachers, for our coaches, for the math community in general, and what would building and district administrators need to do to support that vision. And maybe most importantly, if you can go down a little bit more. All the way down. We identified implications for PLE because simply supplying a resource is not going to change what's happening in terms of an approach to teaching and learning of any subject, let alone mathematics. And so we really wanted to prioritize, okay, this is where we want to go, but what do we need to get there? It's not just a matter of resources. Back to the slideshow. So taking a step back, what is illustrative math? As you know, we're committed to illustrative math, 6th grade through Algebra 1 as the foundation for higher level math classes for our students. Illustrative math, if you look at the bold there, is built on solving problems, reasoning, communicating, and thinking critically. Just want to take a minute to elaborate on the solving problems piece, because I don't know what everybody in the room's experiences with math growing up, but in my experience growing up with math, solving problems meant I would watch the teacher show me how to do something. I would then practice a little bit in class, and I'd go home, and usually it was the odd problems. For whatever reason, we solved the odd problems in math class. And the next day we'd come in and we'd find out if we were right or wrong, and we'd do the same thing for the next topic. And over time, you would hope that somewhere along the line things started to connect. Illustrative math flips that concept on its head a little bit. And it puts the construction of math understanding at the beginning of the process. It's not teaching algorithms and then repeating and showing that you can do what the teacher showed you to do. It's putting a problem or a situation in front of students and asking them to build, construct, and then defend and justify their reasoning. And that's really a powerful way of developing that foundational understanding. Typically, an IM lesson consists of 4 main phases. There's a warm-up, low floor, high ceiling warm-up, so everybody has an access point to preview the math that's either upcoming or review what came from yesterday, or what's going to be coming up in 2 or 3 lessons. Then there are instructional activities, and then there's a lesson synthesis. It's in that lesson synthesis that really that's where the teacher-directed instruction happens, and I think our pilot teachers will be able to speak to that a little bit. That's where the teacher's using all of the formative assessment that they've gathered through the lesson, drawing on student examples and student thinking to synthesize all the learning in the class toward the learning goal of the day. So it kind of takes that teacher-led portion from the front of the lesson to bring it all together at the end. And then finally, there's a cool down, which is kind of like an exit ticket to gauge, did we really get where we thought we were going to be today? Before I hand it back over to Mr. Hoffman to talk a little bit more through the ed reports and analysis of illustrative math, just wanted to point out that illustrative math was designed on these 3 principles: access for all, presumed competence, and strengths-based approach. And so it truly is foundationally built on the idea that all students bring talents to the math classroom and can build on their current understanding.
So ed report, jumping back in. So when we look at our materials, we're looking at what's ongoing with our pilots. We did look at ed report. Ed report is it's an independent nonprofit, and they look at K-12 instructional materials in terms of their alignment, their usability, and other quality criteria. So it's an objective kind of analysis for a district to use when we're looking. In order for a report to be in its full stage, gateway 1, 2, and 3, it has to meet that alignment piece first. So you can see up on on your slides that it does meet the expectations. Meet the expectations is the highest ranking. So that is saying that it meets all 3 of those criteria when it looks at alignment, building knowledge, and usability. You could see on this, Ms. Evans. Yep. You can see on this slide that this is a breakdown of actually going in to look at K1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a K5 elementary version of this. Where it lost any points, and it was just the 2 points across the board, was under usability. And the description that I do want to read for the group says, the materials identify the stages in the mathematical practices assessed in formal assessments. The materials provide multiple opportunities to determine students' learning and sufficient guidance to teachers for interpreting student performance, but do not provide suggestions for follow-up. So that's that spot where once we look at the different things that we can do when we understand that someone's not learning, what happens then? Like, what's the very next follow-up piece? For us, we rated it similarly in the math committee in that area. And in discussing that with both the committee and then internally as a teaching and learning department, that is a tier 1 teaching issue that we would need to look at. How does Universal Screener play into that to help us inform what those next steps would be and guide us through that? How do the actual structures of our day and what we utilize win time for provide that support for that? So it's not necessarily an issue with the instructional resources that we would be providing. It would be what we're doing once we have that information about our students. Internally, there's 9 pieces of data here that were the most impactful to us as we started to work through the internal review of our data. This included professional learning surveys, student pre and post surveys, teacher observations, field notes that we've made while we were in classrooms and while our University of Delaware that you all have offered to us as a support, notes that they've made through those implementations. And I'm going to speak to you about 2 of the rubrics in just a moment. There's a rubric called the EQUIP curriculum materials rubric. EQUIP stands for Educators Evaluating the Quality of Instructional Products. And so we talked about the ED report being that independent external rubric analysis. We used that rubric as an internal assessment for us as we looked at all of those data pieces that I shared with you. This is used by many educational researchers in schools as they're evaluating resources. It's very popular with the next generation science standards, the STEELS standards that we've been talking through. So our committee in the use of that, anyone on our committee who was piloting or closely involved, which was our instructional coaches, looked at all of our materials and the pilot data and scored using that rubric. On the left, you can see that 3 was the highest. We gave a 3 out of 3 for alignment to the depth of PA standards, a 3 out of 3 for the shifts in the PA core standards, which was the focus, coherence, and rigor, 3 out of 3 for the instructional supports, and a 2.75 for the assessment of learning. And that assessment piece is that piece that I was sharing on the ED report, that we too see kind of that gap with the assessments, the next steps with the assessments. The math committee members who were not pilot teachers, so that was the non-pilot teachers, our principals, the teaching and learning office. We used a rubric that we created internally based on our math vision. So that math vision that Mr. Mishner shared worked its way down, and we looked at the instructional materials and our pilot and trial data, and we ranked where we saw those qualities in the materials and in our experience. And you can see across the board some pretty high marks. The grade level fluency was a low one, and that's just a very, very sensitive issue for all teachers when we're looking at what does it really mean with math fluency across the board and defining that. So I think there was some disagreement about how we're defining that, and so that was another implication for us about defining that, that term. And then at the bottom, you see that individual needs with the assessment also was an area. So for us, when you look at the scores, you look at the rankings, you see what we're seeing in our classrooms, those go back to those 3s, that assessment piece from Ed Report, the assessment piece in the EQUIP survey, that goes right down to the implications for professional learning that Mr. Mishner shared at the bottom of our vision statement. That's what drives the work that we do. This is a survey. So following the trial lessons, we asked teachers, our coaches worked with teachers to reflect on the materials and how they perceived their students to approach those materials. All of the questions that we asked those teachers showed normal or better on all of their reflections. And so these 2 that are up here are examples of that. So how would you rate the student actions in terms of engagement and math talk? So you can see that both either stayed the same from what they were used to or in most cases greatly improved there. So this slide has a lot of pilot teacher feedback around student thinking, effort, engagement, math talk, all of those important pieces. But rather than reading slides to you, I think hearing from the people who are in the trenches, our experts, and I like to call them our A team, but they tell me that's too much pressure, our pilot teachers. So they're going to come up and share their experience with you, and then we will come back with our recommendation following that. So who am I?
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Fagan. I teach third grade at Jarretttown, and I am one of the third grade pilot teachers.
And I'm Tamara Dupre. I also teach third grade at Jarretttown. And we also shop at the same
Yes.
place, clearly.
This was not planned at all. This is how close we work as a team. We also would like to say a shout out to our other grade partners, and also Jen, can you stand up? These are the other pilot teachers. Dana Zielinski, third grade, Donna Dahl, third grade, and Jen Vogel. And they put all the effort to pilot this year and also share with everyone. So we would like to get started. We're going to just kind of say a little of what they already said. It's pretty exciting to see that Chris wrote exactly what we were saying about what we saw this year. So here we go. Why teachers love illustrative math.
Okay, so there's really a lot of reasons that we have enjoyed teaching this program this year. One of the biggest things is that starting from day one, it sets up a math community that is super supportive. It makes the students feel safe to share their thinking and their understanding, to take risks, to make mistakes, to persevere. Those are all really important things in math that I think we've found in the past. You know, you have the same 5 kids raising their hands and everybody else is waiting for them to give the answers. And we don't really feel that way this year with this program. You're seeing those kids come out of the woodwork really feeling comfortable to try, which is really the first step for math. And then just some more specific things that we really like about it. Is this me? So the lessons access student prior knowledge and offer opportunities for students to share what they already know. So it's not that I do, then we do, and then you do, where you're going home and then practicing the problems, and the kids that don't get it, and they wait for somebody else to give them the answer. It really allows the students to sort of discover and explore things on their own before the teacher is telling them, this is how you do it. And then you get students that are just trying to regurgitate what the teacher told them, which is really not showing that they're understanding. It's just showing that they're mimicking. I think this is you.
And to piggyback off of what Tamara's saying, just like what she said, we wanted a safe community. We always want a safe community for our third graders, and every teacher wants that. But in particular, we saw them taking challenges. They had opportunities presented through all these lessons for them to make sense of a problem. Instead of us right up front telling them this is how you have to think. They had an opportunity to look at a problem. They started to think. They turned and talked. Next thing you know, they're sharing. And we have some signs when we do IM. We do a lot of this, we agree. And that made us also see that they were all listening to each other's thinking. And if Tamara said something and I'm sitting next to her and I'd be like, I agree, that provides support to her that she's thinking correctly. Or some people would be like, I respectfully disagree. So the teacher's taken out of the equation when they're making understanding and sense of a problem. We weave ourselves in there. And students know in all of our classrooms, they can think any way they like. They need to understand what they're doing and explain their thinking. So this opened up a gigantic world where kids were saying, I can actually think the way I want to think. And next thing you know, the magic started to happen. Students were so actively engaged in class discussions. First few weeks, quiet. Now, I don't know, friends. It's hard to tame the group, and we've had 40 visitors across the district come into our class, and they love to show their mathematical thinking. So the engagement has increased immensely. That engagement only excites us more. And then learning activities provide multiple real-life situations that students can relate to. I can just remember we were doing area. We know area, we measure the space. Then they gave a problem about going and getting some paint. How many quarts are you going to need if the area is 21 square feet? Well, then the kids were like, well, I think we should get this. But wait, if we get that, what if you spill that paint? Oh my, these are real life situations. And then they realize, well, wait, if we go and we order too much, we are wasting our money. And then we got to get back in our car. and drive back, and that's gas. So it was amazing how all of these situations that are concepts, which are the third grade standards of Pennsylvania, are now applied to their real life. And then they go home, and I had parents saying, oh my gosh, they wanted to know about ordering paint. Or wait, they saw an array with all the toilet papers from Sam's Club, and they started to calculate how much. So it really was real life situations, and they saw that math was not only just for that period of time, but math is everywhere.
And so besides just the regular lessons, it also provides centers, which are games essentially, but they support what we've been working on in class. They also enrich. The kids absolutely love them. They seem so simple. We're like, they're not gonna enjoy this, and they're like, think they're like at a casino, like rolling the dice. It's pretty hilarious. Not only that, but the curriculum, I know people were concerned, other teachers were concerned about this as well. It really is accessible to all learners. We have had several third graders, learning support math third graders, that have been pushed back into the classroom because this program allows them to think their way. They have an opportunity to share their strategy, and sometimes their thinking is different than others, and that's okay. And it's actually really important to share with the other kids. They bring like a whole new energy. So I think that's really important for everybody to know that, you know, we're getting kids out of special ed because they're able to be a part of this curriculum. And then every lesson incorporates lots of different activities. The kids are moving, they're working together, they're working independently. We work as a whole group. There's lots of manipulatives and card sorts and all kinds of different elements so that it's not the same. I teach a lesson, you do a workbook page, and then you're gonna do the same page for homework with different numbers. It really keeps them engaged throughout the whole lesson so that they're engaged and they're challenged and they're discussing and all those really important things that we want to see in math. Anything?
Just wanted to add too, is that the students are really discussing, they're mathematically talking about things. And they're saying it. And as the teacher who's kind of guiding it, we're noting down all their ideas. And then kids are like, I want to add on. And then sometimes they're getting to the point that they're like, wait, I hear what you're saying and I understand what you're thinking because I did that yesterday. But then I realized it takes us out of talking all the time, and where kids can start to shut down because they're just listening to us. They learn so much from their friends, and then their friends become teachers. So it's just been an amazing experience, and I know all of us have been teaching many years for math. I think this is my 4th math program. And I love teaching math. I loved it before, but I really love it. And I know anybody who has come to visit us has seen how excited the kids are. So let's get to what the students say about it, because that's really what's most important. Why do students love illustrative math? These ideas came from our friends of every learning level. I like it that it gives us a chance to share our ideas with different people.
I like that when the problems are hard, I have a partner to help me. We help each other learn.
My kids always say this too. I like that the teachers aren't telling us what to do. I like that I can learn it in my way, then talk to my friends. My teacher's there to help us, but doesn't tell us how we have to do it, because we all learn math in different ways. And it's nice to accept that we all are different thinkers, but it's important to explain your thinking. And sometimes when they are turning and talking, we've encouraged them. If Tamara has a different idea that I have and I don't understand it, the conversation starts. Wait, I don't understand. Could you show me and teach me? And this conversation and all the other math programs we've had was happening, but I've never seen it at the level that I've seen this year.
It's a hard act to follow. I like that we don't sit at our desks to do math papers. This program has showed us many ways to solve a problem, and we just have to explain our thinking, which I think is funny that they said we just have to explain our thinking, because that's something where any time before we do like an open-ended math and it says explain, they hate that. Like they don't want to explain their thinking. And now they love to explain their thinking. And that really shows true mastery of a concept. And I always tell my kids, you know, it's one thing to be able to do it. It's another to be able to explain it. So if you can explain to your partner if they're struggling, you know, it's not your job to give them the answer. It's your job to help explain what you're thinking so that they can understand what's going on inside of your head.
Another thing that's awesome is a lot of my students often said, well, you know, before math, somebody raised their hand really quick, quick, quick. And then somebody would say the answer and then it was like, move on. And that just shut down all the thinking. Now we do sign languages in class. So they've come up with, you know, we agree, respectfully disagree. So we as the teacher aren't saying, no, that's not right. Let's think about it. The students are like, well, I'm not sure about that. And then the next thing you hear, oh, I see what I did wrong. Brain just grew there. So these signs, what's another one? Add on. Add on. Sometimes I'm like, slow down, you're going to hurt your fists there. Oh, my student said, can we add one more? I'm just confused about that thinking. And sometimes I'm saying to them, I'm a little confused about your thinking. And then I'm like, because again, we're accepting that everyone thinks in different ways.
And the last one, I like how we can move around during math and share our thinking in lots of different ways. And I think we're hearing from all of these that they do really enjoy being able to explain their thinking as opposed to, okay, this is how my teacher wants me to solve it. These are the blanks I need to fill in. This is what I need to have memorized. It's so much more freeing. And I think it allows more of your students to feel a part of that math community than we've ever had before.
Yes, Jen, come on down.
Jennifer Vogel. I teach first grade at Thomas Fitzwater. So I'm coming from that first grader, your 6-year-old, your 7-year-old. And I just asked them today, I'm like, tell me, you know, what do you like? What don't you like? What's going great? What would you change? And I'm just going to read a few things and I'll pass them around because they're really cute if you try to read them as well. I like doing equations, and you have to see how she spells it. I like doing it by myself. I like drawing on the windows. We let them draw on the windows and the doors with dry erase markers. And, you know, you're never allowed to do that at home. So to do that at school is really, it does wipe off. It's not permanent. But I'll pass some of these around. I like math because it helps me learn. I like math because I'm good at it. We have partners. I like to do centers on my computers, but it's spelled centers with an S. This one says it's teamwork. It's hard, but it's fun. I like how we use the kits. It's cool how we use all the tools. And then a little bubble says, I am smart. This one, I wasn't good at math, now I'm good. I like counting to 100. So just a couple I'll pass around. Thank you.
And I just wanted to say, you said, I am smart. The kids are starting to think like, wow. We had our students that were strong mathematicians, and we had students that really tried and really wanted to understand it, but they were always thinking, trying to mimic a teacher. This has opened up a world where they can see that they learn math in a different way. And this is some of the pictures you're going to see, the thinking boards. These thinking boards that we often have the kids go up to are, they're not permanent. They can erase and change their answers, and also opens up knowledge mobility where they're looking around the classroom and they realize, wait, I did it like them. Oh, I didn't do it like that, but I see what they're doing. As all the teachers of the pilot, we still do the same math standards. We still have the same math activities that the concepts the students had to learn in the program that we previously used. It's just more student-centered, and the engagement has increased. And do we still use assessments that we've used before? Yes. So if those are some of the questions, we can ask more to it, but student engagement, it's amazing. Sorry, we went over 4 minutes. Sorry. Give me a microphone here and it's trouble.
No. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to repeat a number that Steph said. which was 40. They've had 40, maybe more than 40 visitors to their classrooms this year. Those are teachers from across the district, administrators from across the district, board members, and lots of other guests as well. And so thank you for that. And they mentioned the kits, and I do just want to thank the Education Foundation, Upper Dublin Education Foundation, for supporting our pilot through purchasing some of the kits for us to be able to test out. So I wanted to thank those as well. So when we look at the recommendation, the one thing that we had to kind of put it into the bigger picture here is, what do we do with math? We have those implications for professional learning. We also have, as you've heard me speak a lot over the last 2 years, we have STEELS standards that are coming into play over the next 2 years that will be field tested in science for next year and accountability tested the following year. And so thinking of that, thinking of the structured literacy piece, and looking at all of those data pieces that we did examine, we had to put all of that kind of into perspective. And so our recommendation to the board is going to be that we do have an adoption K-5 in all of our classrooms beginning next year. And I'll outline then what the supports for that would look like in terms of resources and structures. So as always, to start with the budgetary considerations for this. You can see on the left the types of things that we would need to order. On that list, it's, I'm going to speak to it kind of in a weird way. The teacher resource pack, the teacher book, the manipulative kit, and the card center and lesson bundle. Those are one-time purchases. The one in the middle, student workbooks, would be an ongoing piece. And, you know, we've had conversations. You heard the teachers talking about the value of being up, the kids liking to be up and working through problems. But those workbooks do offer a lot of value. They're color. They allow the kids to interact a little bit individually and also to have that additional practice. The box to the right of that shows what our current math materials cost per classroom. And so you can see that illustrative, which is the $5.95 number, actually comes in a little less than that from an ongoing perspective. So we're estimating that per classroom, it's going to be $2,400 for next year. We're looking at 81 grade level classrooms. We're going to be meeting with student services and connecting with some other districts to better understand what the student services, the special education classroom needs would look like in terms of what under those resources. For June, we will bring final numbers to you about what all of these pieces look like. We also met with University of Delaware today to discuss what's supporting the elementary, starting to phase out that middle school support and really focusing that attention into our elementary. And we're hoping to have that proposal to you for June as well. In terms of planning for implementation, we do have our 2 professional learning days in June that our hopes would be to go over by grade levels, those grade level overviews, and help the teachers work through unpacking Unit 1. So unpacking the unit is really when they start to dig through what are the targets, what are the steps, what are the understandings that need to be involved, and what would I do to approach that lesson. We think that's important for June so that teachers can feel confident going into summer as they think through preparing for next year. Throughout the summer, we're going to be looking and examining and understanding more of the resources, planning for those gaps. As you know, Pennsylvania utilizes Common Core and Pennsylvania standards, so there's really nothing that fully aligns to that, but there are districts that, the School District of Philadelphia being one of them, that have done a lot of the work, and we've started to do a lot of the work on identifying where those PA standards that are not part of programs are and how to build those into the units in scope and sequence. August and ongoing, we're going to continue to work through those instructional practices and those routines that our pilot teachers were speaking of. We're looking at creative ways to continue that ongoing professional learning. As I mentioned, the benefit of going all in with this adoption next year is that we can devote our professional learning throughout the year to math. Not illustrative math, but to math, so that one of the teachers in our committee said a few weeks ago, well, how would we make sure that we're not where we are with illustrative math 5 years from now as we are with our current resource. And one of the teachers, it was like you couldn't plant the comment any better, but one of the teachers said, well, 5 years ago, we didn't have this vision that was driving our work. You know, you were looking at resources and saying, does this resource work for us? The question this year was, does this resource support what we believe about how kids learn and how we believe that we should be teaching our students? And so that's going to be what's driving our professional learning. As you know, we have collaboration each morning. We have grade level and faculty meetings, and we're going to be looking at a model that pulls out representatives from each building to start to become experts in that unpacking so that they can support their school buildings through those unpacking during collaboration. Other implementation support. So again, I mentioned UDEF's support with the card center and lesson bundles. These are resources that our second and third grade teachers didn't have this version that we're looking at. They had a different model, and that's the beauty of a pilot, right? So that you can see what is working and isn't working. The one that our first grade at Thomas Fitzwater was able to explore actually takes away a lot of the preparation and cutting and packaging and sorting and all of those things that take away from a teacher's actual teaching and instructing students. And so those kits already being prepared and organized are going to be game changers for all of our classes. We're also looking how we maximize our instructional coaches, our instructional support specialists, our curriculum leaders, that professional learning that I mentioned. And the last bullet is really emphasizing the public relations side of this, which is how do we bring our parents into these conversations? How do we break down what an illustrative lesson looks like and feels like and actually have them experience that? So we've been talking through a series of short videos where they can actually see pieces of lessons so that they understand more of an understanding of what is and isn't coming home and what is happening in classes. We'd love to have parents come into our U Design Labs and actually explore and participate in some lessons in evenings, and we can target some of our PTO meetings as well in the fall through that. And finally, we do have meetings on the schedule beginning next week to share what our hope is for a path moving forward, to talk through that following this meeting with our elementary schools. We'll continue to collaborate with special education, looking through the supports that we have, our instructional schedule and how we maximize those minutes and how we really prioritize what those expectations will be through that implementation. So I know that was a long presentation, much longer than normal, but we had a lot of exciting things and a lot of exciting work over the last several months. Actually, as we said in our communication to teachers the other day, 2.5 years really, as we started to look at our Building Thinking Classroom book that many of you have read on the board with us, and then started to kind of work through that vision. It's all come to that recommendation today. And so we're happy to take any questions that you might have.
All right. Thank you so very much for the presentation, especially for all the hard work that went into this to get to this point and to really move the district forward in an area where there's lots of potential. Members of the committee, any questions? Gerald?
So first, thank you for being here tonight in this presentation. It was very informative and very energizing. I mean, I sat through one of the classroom observations, and I wish I had that 30 years ago, because I was one of those students who really struggle with math, right? And so it was, here's the equation. We did the odd numbers as well. Something with the even numbers, just couldn't get to them. I don't know why. But I sat there and with Ms. Sherp here as well, and it was energy, right? And it was about the understanding. And it wasn't so much about getting to the answer. It was about understanding how you get to the answer. And so I sat through 5 meetings today at work. I couldn't tell you what we talked about. I could probably repeat back that lesson plan to you from a month ago. And so I started understanding it. I was the kid whose mother drove them to school at 6:30 in the morning, for that extra tutoring. And so I appreciate this quite a bit. I also want to thank you. I didn't realize it was 2.5 years that you had started this work. And so the pilot program, all the hard work, when you start a pilot, you don't know what the answer is going to be, right? That's why you do the pilot. And so that you took the due diligence, all of the measurement that you've done, the rubrics, all of that, I think is very impressive, and I appreciate the due diligence as well. One thing I wanted to ask about, and maybe it's anecdotal at this point because you have limited data, but for students like me who maybe were struggling, what have you seen? Have you seen that student sort of a light bulb goes off and all of a sudden now, and we saw the notes as well, but I'm curious if there's more there. And then similarly, students that maybe were already excelling at math, did they continue to excel, or are you seeing any changing in their performance?
So I've had students come back from replacement math, and I think they are feeling more successful than they ever have. Math has so many different math concepts, whereas reading, you're doing same reading comprehension activities. So when you have students doing math, there are some areas that they're really strong at and some areas that may need more support. When you're doing those warm-ups and those notice and wonders, you as the teacher are listening. And you're really listening to all the students when you're building this math community, and you're really trying to find all the students as they turn and talk. And sometimes those students that struggle are saying, I think it's this, but they're so afraid to say it because they're afraid they're going to be wrong. The teacher says, can you share that out loud? And then this confidence builds. So we're still there to support them. I think what we've seen is they have a voice in math now. And I was a thinker who didn't, I think back to fourth grade, oh my goodness, I had CML. I remember Continental Math League. And now I see things and they see me go, oh, I see all that now. So I think with that, we're able to support our strugglers. They're getting to think about it before somebody puts the ideas in. Sure, the manipulatives are there. We don't want to go right to the tricks. We don't want to do the standard algorithm unless they're truly understanding what they're doing with those numbers. For our enrichment kids, they have had such opportunities to teach others and then to show their thinking in multiple ways. And sometimes they're not understanding the person next to them. So when it may come before this came real quick, I got the answer. I have the answer. Let's give you challenge. Now it's, well, explain that. Well, what about that? And then they're sitting going, I understand what they're thinking because this is what they're doing. So that mathematical community and the conversations can go really strong with enriching kids, and you can be there to support. And we also have some building thinking classrooms where the kids are all working. And then you can go around and point out and discuss, hey, how about that? So I haven't noticed this year, and I have a very inclusive classroom. And my students that need challenge have been challenged, and they actually love it. They actually want to take over my teaching job because they say, can I be the teacher now? I'm like, you're doing great, keep going. So I don't know, would anyone else, are you thinking, Mrs. Dahl, come on, stand up. Let's hear your voice.
Hi, thanks for having us. I have some very bright mathematicians in the classroom, and they've enjoyed every single day of math. They enjoy taking that leadership role, but the real life math activities and tasks, it lets them, again, explore and challenge themselves and use different strategies. And beyond the math skills that they're learning, just learning to communicate with others and work as a team and problem solve together. And some of them who are so used to getting the answer right away, because we are adding the element of explaining and understanding and having your partners understand, that added a whole nother level to their learning that they weren't necessarily getting, even though they were so bright. They weren't using those skills of justifying or defending what they know already. And that's hard for a lot of them. So I just think it's been wonderful for all my learners.
One of the pieces that ties to that we spoke a lot about is also, the Steele's standards. You're looking at the integration of those, build on, claim, evidence, reasoning. Our TDAs with Ms. Vandergriff here really having those text-dependent analysis, being able to explain your thinking. It's going to make that so much more meaningful as we, unpack that for all students.
All right, Mr. Held has the hand signals down already. All right. Go ahead.
I just want to thank you so much for the presentation. I feel like I not only got information about illustrative math in the pilot, but also just who you are as teachers, and I greatly appreciated that. These are two comments. So to that first comment, it strikes me that so much of what has made the pilot effective are the attitudes and mindsets that you have brought to the work, valuing process over product, leading with curiosity. And that leads to my second comment. In terms of implementation, one thing that I imagine would be critical is really stressing what are the mindsets and attitudes that are going to make this effective, because the curriculum is only as effective as its implementation. So I thank you for being models of those things and just really encourage the entire department and the administration to lead with those things.
All right, Dr. Thomas, go ahead.
I'm so excited to hear about all of this. I love the enthusiasm. I love all the anecdotes about a math community. That sounds amazing. I'm just curious about parent feedback and engagement and, what homework looks like and that component of everything.
Okay, you said parent feedback. This is the first year in 17 years that I have not had one parent at a conference say, my child needs math challenge. We're Upper Dublin. Everybody needs to be challenged. This is literally, I'm not lying. Not one parent mentioned that their child. I have gifted students and bright math students. Nobody mentioned that because the kids are challenged. Bring everything that they have to the table. It really allows for them to really push themselves. Homework really for us, at least in third grade, looks a lot like what it looked like with our previous programs. There isn't a homework component that comes with illustrative like we had in the program that we have now. We were never necessarily the biggest fans of that. It was a lot of like, this is what we did in class. Here's the same problems with different numbers. So we've been kind of supplementing to do some spiral review so that they're reviewing things that they haven't seen in a while. I feel that homework really shouldn't be stressful. And if it's taking a third grader, more than 20 minutes to do their math homework, that's probably too long and they don't understand the concept and they shouldn't be working that hard. It should really be reviewing and sort of just making sure that they're on the right page. So it really has looked pretty much exactly the same as what we were doing before without the fact that we don't have the option of an illustrative math page, if that kind of answers your question there. You see the math homework in third grade.
I do want to add that my parents love it. They knew that we had 40 people coming in our room because their kids are coming home saying they love math. Whatever that math homework is, the way we presented the math concept allowed them to understand it the way they wanted. So what we're really trying to create is problem solvers and thinkers to take a look at a problem and try to solve it in the way they can. But my parents loved it because their kids were coming home saying they loved math. So.
And that homework piece will be something that is part of the slide when we were talking about the implementation expectations and collaboration, is that we need to make sure that across the district we're all approaching that concept the same so that a first grader in one building has a similar experience with what that expectation might look like.
Mr. Sorota.
I'm really excited too. I was excited when we talked about this for the middle school for a lot of the same reasons, really, because I think that we get to a point where eventually, hopefully, we have fewer students getting to higher level grades, especially in high school, and saying, I'm not a math person. I'm really curious, and we talked about that with middle school, Chris, whether there was some feedback loop we could find out in the future. Obviously, it'll take a long time before these students percolate up there, but I'm really curious if we can measure that somehow. And I am curious about what measures of success we have for this already. My other question is, you did identify a couple of weaknesses, might be too strong, a couple of things you didn't love about this program. I think there are really two broad categories of things. And can you talk about specifically in the implementation plan how those will be mitigated?
Yes, so the real issue were that two, but they're connected, right? So it's really how are we looking at the assessment piece? And that's something, as the pilot teachers mentioned, we're utilizing the assessments that, and thank you to Ms. Frank and Mr. Dorneman, our instructional coaches, that have spent a lot of time making sure that our internal assessments are standards aligned and include spiraling and PSSA type questions as well. And so those assessments are things that we've spent a lot of time as a district working through, and we'll continue to utilize those to ensure that we are aligning ourselves to those state standards. So that's how we're addressing the Pennsylvania piece. The piece that we'll need to address this summer is really the order and sequencing of those and making sure that they still work in the order that they need to. In terms of that, what do teachers need in order to determine what that next step is for a student? That's the ongoing piece that we're looking at through our collaboration meetings that are daily, where we're identifying, now we know that we have these. We're, as we build that district MTSS process next year, what is that list of interventions that are in place for students? Where are those working to address some of those gap areas? Where are they not working? And a piece of that's going to be when we look at universal design, universal screeners and other tools that will access that. So it wasn't an issue with any of the content in the actual resources. It was more of how we use those resources, and we do have pieces in place for that.
Right, any other questions? Oh, I see everybody's getting excited about math around the table here. Mr. Wallach.
People are going to say I was a math kid. Thank you, first of all, everyone. It was very enlightening and very excited for this program. Question I have is this. It sounds like assessments still remain largely individualized, even though the basis of the program sounds like it's collaborative and discussion-based and all that stuff that you've talked about. And I'm curious if there's any thought in shifting assessments to somehow be more collaborative. And I guess part two of my question is, are there challenges in getting the students to move from the collaborative-based instruction to the individualized assessments, and how do we overcome those? Do those questions make sense, hopefully?
Yeah, sign me up for the collaborative assessments. We can just talk to PDE and work on the PSSAs. And I'll, if the teachers have anything specific to speak to about the nature of the activities and then the assessments, I'm all ears there. But I think the nature of the way that Illustrative approaches this is that I think students will end up on the assessment, correct me if I'm wrong, excited to show what they know, whether it's individual or as a team. And what the assessments are really used for in this, or really in any program, should be for guiding teacher response. They're a measurement of what any individual student needs. And so I think when you get into the collaborative, sounds great in theory in terms of assessment, but at some point as a teacher, you need to know where you need to intervene with any individual. Additional?
So throughout the lessons, they are always assessing the kids. So when they're at the boards, they're collaborating, and they're assessing. But unfortunately, or fortunately, I'm not sure how you look at it, we are tied to the PSSAs. So we really felt like we needed to give our kids exposure to those types of questions. So we have embedded them. And I heard from the third grade, so we're just wrapping up our math PSSAs, and they said the kids were actually excited to take them because they were like, they see it as a challenge. And our PSSA questions, they aren't just one concept. So when we are taking them, when the kids are taking the PSSAs, they have to bring everything to the table, and they have to bring all their concepts, and they have to persevere through to get through those questions. So that's what this program is doing. It's building thinkers. So we're really excited about that.
Ms. Evans.
So I want to echo what other folks said. Thank you guys for being here. All of the third grade teachers my kids have ever had are in this room, so I already know you're great. But I think it's really great for our community to hear from you and see your enthusiasm. And I think I've said it before, anytime we have teachers come in and kind of share their experience, I think it's so valuable and rich, and it just really gives us a deeper understanding. So I have a question and a comment, or actually, that was my comment. I have two questions. One is for this group and one is for administration. So the question for this group is, when you're kind of dividing the kids up into the groups, I'm just curious how you go about doing that, right? Because I could see different methodologies, right? You could have, on the one hand, your kids who are stronger in math, it's probably helpful to have them guide, but I wouldn't want them to overtake the conversation every time either, right? So I'm just curious kind of how you divide kids up.
You're going to like the science to this answer, Miss Evans.
Random.
Ding, 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 random. We do randomizers every day. So we're up to 100 and some days. The kids have worked with everybody. And then if we do have them go to thinking boards and stuff in the classroom, we have some rules where one person has to write, the other person has to tell, they have to turn and talk. So I think, we started off by saying the math community. We established that math community day one. What does a math community look like? How are you going to support each other? What's my role? What's your role? And I think by randomizing it, they all know they have a responsibility in their learning and supporting each other. And I've only seen success in it. And we always go ding, boom, 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 and they get with their partner and go. So it's been very beneficial. Do you all agree?
Also, teacher training, I think in the beginning is going to be crucial, because in our openings, when we turn and talk and kids are discussing, we're walking around listening and listening. And in your mind, you're thinking, all right, I would like to, you have talking sticks, which Julie introduced us to, or someone did. And, you share what you just talked about, and you have kids that aren't necessarily raising their hand all the time, but giving them that moment to share what they learned. Or could you tell us what your partner said, and giving them that opportunity to talk. And so, you have all different students sharing their ideas and collaborating every day. I mean, I think all of our students said they love working with different friends every day. It's been awesome.
In my first grade classroom, I do partner cards, so I randomly pass out cards. They have to go find their partner. So again, they're up getting the wiggles out kind of thing, find their partner. It's even in a first grade, it's nice for them not to think, well, those two are together because she's really good at math and she's not, so I know she's going to pull through and get all the work done. So it takes that out of the equation, and they feel like they're both really strong at math. So just one thing I do.
I just wanted to piggyback off what she said. The wiggles are out. They're constantly to the rug, turning and talking, sharing. Okay, go do an independent activity, up at the boards. There's so much movement that the kids are constantly moving, thinking, and getting excited for the next activity.
Awesome, thank you. So question for administration, this is, the nerdy finance committee question. Do we already have the cost for this baked into the budget that we've been seeing so far?
Yes, so the slide that had the workbook costs, so those are, when we didn't know in February what we would or wouldn't be doing specifically, principals put this year's workbook costs in, which we knew were a little higher. So that'll be a little bit, about $1,000 to $3,000 savings per building budget that we'll be working through. And then the one-time cost was a lump number in the teaching and learning budget, and that number has actually come down a little as well. So as we massage between now and June, what those exact numbers are, but everything's already built in.
Right. Are there any more questions? No. Yes, I agree with the excitement, but also having had the opportunity to visit a number of classrooms, both at the elementary, but also at the middle school. One of the things that comes through very clearly that now things are with illustrative being a K through 8. There is consistency in approaches. There is going to be looping or revisiting content. There's the randomization of groups. I saw that in 7th grade, just as I saw it in 3rd grade. And so I think there's a lot of promise down the road for that continuity and that excitement, and not really just in math. We already heard about the potential for our STEM or our STEELS related work, but also I think in the language arts. So I think it's not just math. I mean, it's really a way of of teaching and learning that we're seeing well, potentially look different. I think the other part that I really liked about this, and I'm very excited about, is that kids are really looking at understanding. So I don't think it is something where we see the need for a lot of reteaching as you go on. I mean, too often what is taught in third grade, well, you have to revisit it again in fourth or fifth or sixth or seventh or wherever. Doesn't mean that students will not see it again, but they already own it. They've already understood it. So I think we're going to see a lot of gains in that. So while this may appear initially a little bit more time consuming and setting up of routines and things like that, once that is ingrained, I think there are going to be huge benefits as we continue on over the years with this. So that has me very, very excited. Being a math teacher myself, I'm thrilled about this. But I really, really think I want to thank everybody who's been involved in this so far. And also, I hope you're going to be the big cheerleaders for everybody else who hasn't had the opportunity to experience this, to help them and to support them, because this is going to be a step forward. And change is always hard. You have clearly embraced it. You've shown us that it can be done and that it's really fun and exciting, but it's also a lot of hard work. So yeah, be the cheering team and being the support, as I know you'll be. And thank you again, and let's move forward. Oh, thank you. And if at this point you want to go and sample the food trucks or watch the the art show, please feel free to do so. Unless Mr. Hoffman has other other ideas. Thank you, thank you. All right, and that gets us to our third presentation. Ms. Summers has been very patient, but I did warn her when we have students or when we have teachers coming to present, the presentations tend to be a little longer than but thank you for your patience, and let's get on to the special education plan.
Thank you. I don't know if mine's going to be as exciting. I don't have sign language, but that was such an amazing presentation, and the energy was incredible. So tonight, yes, I'm here to provide you information regarding the special education plan. This is a tonight, what I want to do is talk about what the plan entails, the process of the plan, and then the different components of the plan, and the information that goes within the plan. This is in draft form. It will be in draft form for another month, and I'll talk a little bit about how we then elicit feedback from the community as well. So the special ed plan, it's something that's done every 3 years. So we will be 2024 to 2027 for this plan. And really what it does, it describes the special education and program services that are provided within the school district, and then it talks about the programs and services that are provided outside the school district that our students access, and how the district plays a role in supporting those students. So I wanted to talk about the timeline, what we've done thus far, and what we still have left to do before the submission of the plan, which will be on June 30th. So in March, we identified participants for the Special Education Plan Steering Committee, and then I started to work on the sections of the Special Education Plan. On April 8th, the Steering Committee met for the first time to review the components of the plan and then gather feedback, especially on the professional learning component. There is a part at the end of the plan where there's certain sections that we have to provide professional learning moving forward, and that's newer to the plan. Before it was just whatever you wanted to provide. Now the state, which I think is great, is really identifying different areas that we have to make sure as a district that we are taking a look at. Then from April 9th to April 24th, I included that feedback from the committee, and I completed the remainder sections of the plan. April 25th, we had the ability for the steering committee to come together virtually to review the feedback that I had included from our first steering committee. Today, I'm presenting the first draft of the plan to you all. And then after this, the plan will then be put on the website for 30 days so that the public has the chance to review it. And then June 1st, I will provide additional feedback presentation during the Education Committee. So anything that has changed between now and then, I'll provide and highlight that feedback for you. And then at the legislative meeting in June, we'll submit the motion for approval of the special education plan, and then we will submit it on June 30th. So that is the timeline of the plan. And as you'll see as we go through, the plan is very specific as far as the different sections. They're not sections that we create, it's the sections that PDE provides us. So a lot of this it's a little misleading because it's a plan, but really it's just information on the current state of the district, of what we're working on. You'll see throughout the narrative plan, the 130-page plan, it does talk about things that we want to improve as we go through just based off of the data that we have so far as well. So I want to review what the plan components are. So these are the different sections of the special education plan. We have indicators in monitoring, the identification method, significant disproportionality, non-resident incarcerated student oversight, LRE, positive behavior supports, intensive interagency, education program file, special ed support services, and special education personnel development. I'm going to go through all of those sections so that you understand what they are and the data that's included in those. For our steering committee, we had the chance to include special education and general education teachers, parents, board members, and administrators, which was a wonderful group. So you'll see we had 13 people that were a part of the steering committee, and it was great because we really were able to get all different viewpoints as far as, people's experience in special education, what they have found have worked for students, what they wish we could have more of. So it was a really great conversation. I really appreciated, that feedback. So I did list all the people that have been a part of the plan, and I will continue to, reach back out to them just to gain, any additional feedback that they have as we get close to completing the plan. So again, like I said, we met on April 8th. We had a virtual component on April 25th for the steering committee as far as how often we met. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through the sections of the plan so that you understand, where they're coming from and why, what the data entails. So the first part talks about areas of improvement in planning. So these are indicators. So these are indicators that are found within the plan, and what happens is that these indicators, there's data that's pulled every year, and that data goes directly to these areas. And if there is a need or a concern, you're flagged and you get that information. At this time, based off of all the indicators, we have no indicators that have been flagged at this time for this component of the plan, which was really great to hear coming in, as a new director. So I will say, when you look at this data, it's always, this is from the 21-22 school year. It's never, current, because they're gathering the data from the states and then they provide what they call the special education data reporting. And that is a report that we receive every year. I think moving forward, what will be great is, because this plan is a 3-year plan, it will be good for me to come back to the board every year to present that special education data reporting so that you can see where we are when it comes to numbers, least restrictive environment, and all of these indicators. So I think, because since we won't come back to this plan until 3 years, I think it will be important that we, go through that. So I think that would be a great thing moving forward to be able to do in the spring of every year. So no indicators have been flagged at this time, so that will be noted in the plan moving forward. The next section of the plan talks about identification methods. So you have to identify as a district, how you're identifying students with specific learning disabilities. So the way in which we do this in the district is using the discrepancy model. So what the discrepancy model is when we're identifying a student, or we're looking at a student that may have a learning disability, we're looking at their cognitive ability, and then we're looking at their achievement. And then when we see that there's a discrepancy, so say they are of average to high intelligence when it comes to IQ and how the brain works, but then we're seeing in achievement, that maybe math and reading, that their scores are lower. So obviously there's something that's going on here, and we have to figure out why that discrepancy is happening. A lot of the times kids are compensating, or so we want to take a look at why that's happening. So that's what our school psychologists take a look at when they're identifying a student with specific learning disability. So that is something that you have to identify within within your plan. The next two sections talk about non-resident and incarcerated student oversight. So you have to identify as a district if you are a 1306, that you have a 1306 facility within your district. We do not, but if we did, what that would look like is we have students that are medically fragile that live in different residential settings, and if that that facility is within your district, you become the host district. So you provide them the education. You're not paying for it, but you bill the district of where the parents are living, but typically the parents are not living in the district because they're sending their child because of this specialty care. So we are not one of those districts, but they do ask within the plan to say, if you were, how would you work through this? So really the big piece of when you're a part of a 1306 facility, you're making sure that you're having communication with the facility, you're identifying what the needs of the student are. Typically a student could, whether they need nursing, transportation. So you become that host LEA. You become that, that back and forth to make sure the student is getting what they need, as well as also we work a lot with the MCIU. You would work with the MCIU to provide those services as well. Incarcerated student oversight, we also do not have we don't have a spot in which, we are a facility where students are, getting that education within our realms, within a correctional facility. So that is something that we don't have, but again, would be very similar to a 1306 facility where we would make sure that we were providing that, that communication back and forth so the student is getting what they need. The next section of the report talks about least restrictive environment, and that's always a big component of the report. And what that takes a look at is your numbers when it comes to LRE. I always like to start off with what LRE is and to make the point that a student's LRE is going to look different from one student to another. Least restrictive environment isn't necessarily a student in the general education environment for the entire day. That's not everyone's LRE. When we talk about least restrictive environment, we talk about that environment in which a student can be successful and they're gaining, and they are with their, general education peers for what is meaningful and most appropriate. Some of our students need a small group classroom for certain parts of their day, and that's important to identify. So what I did was created this visual that talks about least restrictive to most restrictive, and then on the right side, talking about kind of what that looks like within the classroom. So that could be a regular education class, and within that class, you could have no supports. You might have indirect supports or direct supports from a special education teacher within that classroom. You might have a student that's in a special education class for some of the day, for a good portion of their day. And then from there, we look at a specialized school where we're identifying that there is a school outside of, outside of Upper Dublin that might be, a better fit for that student based off of their needs. And then there's also residential settings where students are, living there and also gaining access to their education. And then the most restrictive setting that we have in special education is called instruction in the home. And that is when the student is at home, they have no access to, any of their other peers, and we're providing instructors that are going into the home to provide them instruction, which we do have a few students that, have that, at this time. So I wanted to just kind of paint what LRE looks like and how it really is different for every student based off of their needs. So I wanted to share what our percentages are when you look at LRE. So you'll see that students served in the general education environment for 80% or more of their school day. Within Upper Dublin School District, we have 69.5% students that are within that category. And I compared it to the state average, and the state average is 61.8. And this is as of the December 1, 2022 child count. Every December 1st, we have to submit a report to the state that identifies all of our students and how they're being served and what their LRE currently is. And you can find this at the back of a student's IEP, and is discussed at every IEP meeting. So you'll see that. And then I'm going to go to the third category. Students served in the general education environment for less than 40% of the day is 5.7% in Upper Dublin. The state average is 9.9. And then I like to look at the number between 40 and 79% as well. The state doesn't calculate this, but I like to take a look at it because these are your students that a lot of are what you consider supplemental level of support. So usually they're having at least maybe 2 subjects that they're receiving in a special education classroom. And, I like to take a look at that because sometimes we're going to have kids that will eventually be able to move into that itinerant, level of support, which is very exciting because they need less supports at that time. Or sometimes we might have students that are really struggling and they have to move into that, what we call that 40% or less of the day because maybe they're having some struggles and we have to identify how to, what other supports. So, I put the state average there because it's good to see where we are, and it is important. I also say that things are very individualized as well. And I think as long as we can justify why students are in their setting and we can justify via their progress, that's what's really important. And then we also have students served in other settings. So that would be settings outside of Upper Dublin School District, 4.4%, but the state average is 4.8. So just so that you have some ideas what those numbers entail.
May I just interrupt? These percentages are based on students with IEPs,
Correct.
right? It's not the total student body, it
Nope.
is the students
Yep.
with IEPs.
Students with IEPs, yep. So then I also wanted to take a look at special education enrollment. So our total enrollment in Upper Dublin is 4,061. Total enrollment in special education is 699. So percent of students that are identified with special education needs is 17.2% within the district. The state average is 18.6. So it's always good to be under that state average. I think that's something though that we continue to take a look at how we're identifying students and different supports that we're putting in place, which, as I'm here longer, it will give me some time to really take a look at what that identification process looks like and how we're able to provide tiered supports for students even before getting to the special education realm and what those are going to look like. I also wanted to show part of that special education data report that I talked about earlier where it shows you the different indicators. I wanted to identify, just Upper Dublin enrollment by disability. I thought this was just interesting information to see where we took a look at autism, emotional disturbance, intellectual disability, other health impairment, specific learning disability, and speech or language impairment. Again, just to compare again, to the state where we are when it comes to identification. The big one that stuck out for me is that you'll hear in many districts right now is the other health impairment, how we have, a lot more students that are being identified as OHI. And a lot of this is, we're looking at attention and focus, where we're looking at executive functioning. Also too, this is as of the December 22 count, we're also coming off of COVID, and there were for a good amount of time, we weren't able to really execute these skills that, that we weren't able to do in front of a computer. So, that was interesting data to me because I feel that, as we move forward, it's going to be really important that we provide our teachers that toolkit to work with students that have those executive functioning needs, and not just special education students, all students. It is a really great skill to be able to work on. It's a lifelong skill. And when I talk about executive functioning, it's the thinking behind the doing. That's the best way I can, really describe it. So that will be something that we will, I'm hoping to take a look at as we look at professional learning and to how to provide, our students and our parents, because executive functioning happens at home as well, and how we can support them within the classroom. And what was great to hear about IM is that, the getting up, the moving around, there's multiple things going on. I enjoyed that because I think for a student that, sometimes with that attention and focus need to be able to get up and move around the classroom and to have different groups like that can be very helpful to a student that might have some executive functioning, attention and focus, needs. So that was really exciting to hear for our students moving forward. So then I also wanted to talk a little bit about our programs because this isn't a specific part of the plan, but again, I wanted to just give context to where our programs are and what we support. So Fort Washington supports, we have both learning support and autistic support programs. Jarretttown, we have learning support and our life skills kind of MDS support classroom. Maple Glen is learning support, and Thomas Fitz learning support and MDS support. And as I had noted earlier when we had met, Monday, our students in learning support, that doesn't necessarily mean that the students in those programs are just students with learning support needs. That's how they're classified, but you could have a student with autism in that class, a higher functioning autism. You could have a student that struggles with emotional support needs, and we're identifying how to support those students within the classroom as well. So that's And so then at Fort Washington, with our autistic support program there, that is what we call a regionally based program. Depending on the needs of the student, all of those students, certain students will go to Fort Washington for that specific program, just because of the level of need that they require for their programming. At Sandy Run, we have autistic support, emotional support, learning support, life skill support, and MDS support. So we have the full continuum of services there, as well as Upper Dublin High School, as far as what those supports look like. And then again, I just wanted to briefly talk about, because this does go to LRE and how we continue to look at LRE and supporting our students in the classrooms, is just that continuum of services and learning models. What are we doing right now, and what does that look like? I've talked before that we have that one-to-one or small group learning in special education classrooms or in a therapist classroom. So it's that small group piece where a student might not be able to, the general education environment is too much or, not successful for them at that time. So we're looking at, how can we do that within the smaller group setting? Co-teaching is another area that we look at, especially at the high school, which will be something that we're excited to hopefully expand, into the middle and elementary schools. We also do push-in support from a special education teacher and push-in support from an educational assistant. So really, when we're looking at those different models, really the IEP is what drives what that's going to look like for a student. And all the time, we're thinking outside the box and we're identifying, what kids need when it comes to their learning environment. But again, it's all driven by that IEP team meeting. So another component of the plan talks about positive behavior support. So really it asks you to list the different things that you do to support that positive behavior support model. So obviously we have our school counselors, our school counselor support. We have 1 at each elementary school, 3 at Sandy Run, and 5 at the high school. We also have Lakeside that comes in to help support counseling as well for our students. We have board certified behavior analysts. We have 3 total, and then we also have 5 registered behavior technicians throughout the district. And these are individuals that work within our classrooms and with some of our students, and just coming with a bit more of a behavioral background to support some of our students that might need that additional support. We contract with a social worker through Lakeside that helps. We also do professional development on de-escalation and prevention techniques. That's something that you have to identify within your plan. And this is, we're looking for students that are in that crisis mode to be able to figure out how to de-escalate them verbally, but if not, at least in a last resort, how we would need to support them physically if behaviors would go to that certain level. The Student Assistance Program is something else that we also use, school-wide positive behavior support programs that are housed in every building and what those look like, and then student-specific behavior support plans. And that's very specific to the student. So these are the things that are put in place, at least at this time, when it comes to positive behavior support. So then the bulk of the plan, and when you look at the PDF version, and it's over 100 pages, it's very overwhelming at first, but you'll notice a good 60 to 70 pages of that plan are the caseloads. So what you have to do is you have to identify the building name, the support type, the level of support, classroom location, caseload, and age range. So that is something that we have to put it within the plan. So it's every teacher and their caseload broken down. And then that has to then, it goes into the plan, and then it's flagged if you're over a certain amount of the 1.0 FTE. So that really is a good component of the plan. And then what will happen is, as that changes, it's really good practice to go back in and update it, through, each year. And that's something that I'm, going to do. And it really continues to help me look at trends of caseloads as well. And then you do the assurance check for all classrooms. What this really looks at is, where's your classroom located, making sure that you don't have a wing of all special education classrooms. You want to make sure that the classroom is big enough for the amount of students that are going to be in the classroom, that it's readily accessible, and that the class is comprised of at least 28 square feet per student. So facilities was wonderful to help us with this project, where we were able to give them all the classroom numbers, and then they were able to help us, with that information as far as the square footage. And it was also really great for me, being new, really to be able to see where these classrooms are. And, as we look forward, is there anything that we would want to move around and change as our programs continue to grow? The next section of the plan talks about special education support services. So pretty standard, just who are part of our student support team, our student services team in special education that don't carry what we consider a caseload for a special education. So we talked about, we have one director, we have 3 special ed supervisors, 5 school psychologists, 3 OTs, 6 speech therapists, 1 physical therapist, 2 hearing and vision, and they are through the MCIU, 3 behavior specialists, we have 61 paraprofessionals, and then we have 3 counselors from Lakeside that provide the support. And I just, again, have to do a shout out for this team. They've been incredible. I've learned so much from them in just the last 2 months, and I really appreciate the time that we've spent together and the out-of-box thinking that we've done to support students. And then the last section of the plan talks about special education personnel development. This was where I was talking about before. We have to identify within the different topics some type of professional learning that we are going to do over these next 3 years to make sure that we're addressing all these areas. So what I'm going to provide for you is the minimal amount of, there will be a lot more that we're going to do. 3 years is a lot to plan out, but I know for sure these are areas we're going to touch upon, and I'm sure there will be plenty more. So the first area is autism. As we know, the area students identified with autism is continuing to increase, and autism is a spectrum. So we have to really make sure that we have the tools to be able to support all our students on the spectrum, because 2 students with autism look very different. So we're going to look at doing an introduction to autism within our buildings. I've done this in previous districts, and I've gone to faculty meetings because a lot of teachers are going to have students in their classroom, on the spectrum. And, I always say some of the specific strategies that we might use for a student on the spectrum is probably quite helpful for other friends, within the classroom as well that aren't identified. So we're looking to do that. And then we're also going to be doing a training that talks about social skills. There really is a very intricate way into teaching social skills to make sure that they are effective. And it's a 4-part process, and so we want to make sure that we're, showing that to special education teachers, because social skills is an area that is harder to teach. It's abstract. And when you take a look at identifying data and how to gather that data, it can be quite hard because your environments are continuing to change. And we're also getting feedback from teachers as well that would be something that they would really appreciate. So we'll be looking at that as well. Positive behavior support. We've had a lot of talking about trauma-informed care, right? And how trauma can affect behavior and how that can affect students. And so I want to end families. And so we're hoping to have, someone come in to provide trauma-informed care, and not just for the special education population, but for entire staff, because I think it's so incredibly important. Paraprofessionals. We're going to do 1 session, and again, this is just the minimal. We want to spend some time with our paraprofessionals on data collection, behavior plan implementation, and job coaching, because there's quite often a time where a paraprofessional may be in a general education environment with a special education student, having to take some data on goals because maybe the special ed teacher can't be in there. So we want to make sure we're providing them the tools and giving them the support they need to take that data so that we can see how students are doing in their least restrictive environment. As well as behavior plan implementation. We have our paraprofessionals are working with several students within a day, so we want to make sure we can empower them and make sure that they have, the understanding of what these behavior plans look like, how to support these students, as well as job coaching for our older students, our students that are out in work-based learning, they're out in the community, how we can provide them that job coaching. And then the role of the paraprofessional within the general education classroom. That's another big one that we had also talked about. We have some general education teachers that aren't used to having other adults in their classroom. So we want to provide them with the support on, the best way to collaborate with another adult in your class, how to best use them so that we are making sure that we're meeting the needs of all the students within the classroom. Transition, so indicator 13 is a big one. That's where you're looking at a student's IEP at 16 years and older, where you start to talk about post-secondary goals, employment, independent living, things like that. We want to make sure that we have really strong processes put in place and we have really strong goals and services ready for our students. So that is something that indicator 13 is something we continue to look at, and we'll provide training on that for our secondary team. Science of literacy, with the new regs that are out, structured literacy training that our general education teachers that are going to be, would be going through, that would be the same for our special education teachers, as well. For parent training, 2 areas that we want to take a look at is post-secondary supports. So identifying for families what's out there, once your child graduates or reaches the age of 22. Also, understanding what's the paperwork component, what should they be looking at, do they have medical assistance, do they know what the waiver looks like, how can they get funding ready for their child for once they reach 22. Parents have so much on their plates, and within the school system, I will always say you will have everything you have here. I said, but what we need to start doing is advocating for your child once they leave Upper Dublin, and how can we provide you with those tools to do that? Which then goes into the next component is that resource fair. Taking a look at, it's sort of a training, but it also provides, we'd love to get the community together and look at what are all the supports that we have out in the community for students, whether it comes to mental health, medical assistance. I was able to meet someone who, is very, his business works with students who are on the spectrum that are learning how to drive. It's all those things that, I feel like parents can get very overwhelmed with because there's so much out there. So I'd love to be able to bring everything together in one spot where they could come and be able to talk to these different people and the different supports that they provide. IEP development, we want to look at some IEP training regarding what we call our cyclical monitoring feedback. So we are getting, we're going to be monitored in the fall, either the fall or the spring. And so it's a very intensive process. It really breaks apart all of our processes when it comes to IEP and development. And what is really great about the process is that you get a lot of great feedback. So my hope is that as we get feedback from the monitoring, we'll be able to use that to help then further support teachers in their IEP writing. And then the last one just talks about de-escalation safety techniques, which is a training that is required every year. So that will be something that we will continue, within the district. Oh, what did I do? Thank you. So then again, like I said, I put the timeline in the beginning of the presentation. Now I put it back here at the end. The next piece would be for it to go live for 30 days, continue to gather feedback from the community, from you all, from the steering committee, so that we can bring it back in June for a motion for approval. I know that was a lot of information. So any questions?
Right. Thank you very much for the presentation, and I'm sure there are some questions. I see Ms. Ionetti is ready to go.
Committee goes first, but if they're still thinking, I'm ready.
Go ahead.
Okay, I have a few questions and comments. So the discrepancy model, sorry, this is not close enough. The discrepancy model that you gave the example of when a student scores well but it does not achieve. Is that I guess, I'm assuming that's just one example. If you have a student that scores well in one area and scores really low in another area, would that also be a learning disability? Okay.
Yes, how it's identified in IDEA is a specific learning disability, but then what the psychologist then does will identify the area. So they could have a specific learning disability in math, but not reading. Yeah, so we would delineate what that looks like within the report.
Okay, thank you. This is more, not necessarily not for this report, but I know you're new and everything. So it would be interesting if you came back next year, if you included peer districts and, you had like, you compared our averages with the state.
Yeah.
And a lot of times in our presentations, we like to look at like our neighbors, neighbors. Mark can give you the list.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Just to get a clearer picture.
Yeah.
There was the specific learning disability. Okay, there was a graphic about that. And then there was the other health impairment.
Mm-hmm.
So is there anybody in-house that can say you have a specific learning disability? How does that work? Like, I guess I'm wondering why it's not specific and it's other health impairment. Like the number was really high.
Oh, the increase. So
and I know you're new and I'm sorry.
No. This is great. So you're asking kind of why are we seeing such the increase of OHI?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a couple of different pieces to that. I do think that COVID has had a big, part of it as far as when we're looking at students and we're seeing the need in the area of executive functioning, how students are struggling with that. Because sometimes what you can do is you can look at, when you look at, maybe cognitively they're right where they're at, but we're seeing some deficits in performance. We can look at that as an SLD, but we also sometimes what we're identifying is that students, maybe they're in that general education environment, but they can't access their learning. And we're identifying that, assessments, they're not doing well on assessments, but cognitively they're right where they should be. And sometimes that's just the environment and what that looks like. And I think we're seeing that more and more students are struggling in that large group environment, whether it has to do with attention and focus, executive functioning. Sometimes we're even looking at some of that anxiety as well, where students are struggling. So I think that, and it's something I'm going to want to dig into a little bit more, but from my previous experiences, what I've seen is that we also have a lot of students coming to us with ADHD diagnoses. Now, we can't diagnose ADHD because it's medical, but when a doctor is coming to us, they're talking to us about all the things that the kids are struggling with. That is something that we will take into consideration, not necessarily diagnosing the student with OHI, but it is a component that we want to take a look at, when we're looking at how students are, exhibiting those types of ADHD-like traits within the classroom. So I think that, what we have to do kind of moving forward is when we look at those OHI, diagnoses, it'll be interesting for me to kind of start to look at reports and see what area of OHI are they struggling with. And, is there something that we can be doing proactively to support these students before they're coming to that special ed process?
Okay, so a follow-up question is then so the doctor says they have ADHD.
Yep.
And that is not going to go in the IEP?
No, it absolutely can. It's a report that we can add to the evaluation. A lot of families will often come to us and say, I'm seeing all of these things. I think my child has ADHD. I need you to diagnose that. ADHD is not an educational diagnosis within IDEA, but what we will often say is that we are seeing.
Excuse me, Ms. Ionetti, can you turn off your microphone, please?
That we are seeing maybe tendencies or components of that ADHD within the classroom, which would tend to lead to that OHI diagnosis classification, I should say. And then that's where we figure out how to best support the student. So it is great information for us to have. We just look at it from an educational lens.
And then the social worker. So how is that accessed and what are the services that are provided?
So right now, so the social worker, typically when we have a concern for a student, it usually will filter through the principal first. Our social worker spends a lot of time now with students that are struggling with coming to school as far as attendance. They will also provide resources for families and work with other agencies that help support students getting them into school. So that is something that we'll typically see a lot of. Students that are struggling from trauma, students that, I also, like if there is something that happens in the home, if there's a fire, if there's, so they kind of actually work very much hand in hand with the homeless liaison as well, to really provide supports for families. Sometimes our social worker may end up going to court, depending on the need of the student. But right now we're seeing a lot of it with attendance, also with just family trauma within the home and how we can support that.
So the principal has to recommend it.
Right. Well, I don't say recommend it. I think what will happen is the principal will get wind of something. And so that is just kind of our gateway to say, okay, you know what, this is something that we might want to look at getting our our social worker involved. And then that kind of goes through that channel.
All right, that's it for now. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions from the committee? Dr. Thomas? Yeah.
I was just curious about the Upper Dublin enrollment by disability. Is that the educational placement and it adds up to 100, or does it account for kids who have a speech and language disability but also are autistic? Or
Yeah, no, that's a great question. From my understanding, it's the primary disability category. So it's looking at the evaluation report, and whatever the primary is, that's how we're identifying it.
Okay. I think it would be helpful to know, like, kids who are autistic who also carry an ID diagnosis, or you know, things along those lines.
Absolutely. Yep, I can get that information for you.
Any other, Mr. Held?
So this is less about the plan and more about the public review of the plan.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if you could share more about that. I'm sure members of the general public are interested, but probably
Yeah.
parents of students with special education needs
Sure.
are more interested.
Absolutely.
And so ensuring that they sort of are targeted or oversampled with communication.
Yeah.
So that's my first question. And then a second question is, if it's a 3-year plan, there are students who are not yet in the district who will then be sort of impacted by this plan. And so I don't know how we reach those parents,
Yeah.
but if there's opportunities to do so, I think that's a good idea as well.
No, I think that's great. So I think as far as the 30-day review, there's a couple different avenues that we can do. One, it'll get posted on the main page of the website to say, click here to review the special education plan. I think one thing I've also done in the past is actually sent out what I would call a Blackboard Connect, but something out to the entire community to let them know that it's available and that they, this is the way in which they can submit feedback. I've typically done like almost a Google form, or I give them my information directly, because there's some families that just want to call and talk, especially since the sensitivity of some of the subjects. So I would offer it that way. And then I would also want to send something probably most likely specific out to our current special education families that could go through their case manager to let them know that it's available. And if they had any feedback, that they could reach me, couple of different ways. And then as far as the students coming into the district, that's really great. And I think that, we might not get their feedback now because they're not here. But I think through the early intervention process, when students are transitioning to us, that's going to be really important that we, talk to families about what we offer. And then I'm hoping as I'm here longer, it's just to be able to be a constant face and, into the community to talk about the programs that we have so that we're not missing any feedback. You're welcome.
Right. Mr. Sorda?
Thanks. So just recapping what I think we as a board need to know or do with this. As I understand it, we're going to be asked to approve it in June and before it can be submitted to PDE. Is that right?
Correct. There's a paper that the president has to sign in order for me to
Right.
submit it for you.
So, and as I look at it and hearing you speak, it sounds to me like this is more of a snapshot than actually a plan. I know we're not determining the name or the structure of it, but so is, to what extent is this is going to sound pejorative, but I don't mean that way. To what extent is this a compliance exercise, which I recognize was very helpful for you coming in fresh and having to evaluate all of these things, but is it a compliance exercise, and to what extent is it actually a living, breathing, actual plan that we're going to execute, or is there some other thing that is that?
That's a great question. It is a bit deceiving. It is definitely a compliance measure. It's something that we have to do. And like I said, in the beginning part of the plan where it talks about the different indicators, based off of the yearly data that we get, if anything is flagged, and that's something that we have to report on and create some type of plan, additional plan to make sure that we're not flagged moving forward. So I think what my goal is to, from getting the information from the plan, doing our compliance monitoring, there's going to be something within house, within, Upper Dublin that I would like to create that talks about, starting from Dr. Smith's, goals within special education, identifying how we're going to reach those goals. So I think that it is a compliance measure. It gives you a snapshot of the district. It does talk about areas that, based off of our data, where we could improve. And then from there, I would see something that, coming from the special education department to talk about, how are we going to, devise certain goals so that we're making sure that we're supporting our teachers and supporting our families. Hope that helps. Okay, you're welcome.
Other questions? I think sort of following up on Mr. Soroda's question, and also something that you alluded to, that yes, this is a document, but I think it will be very helpful to the board, but also to the community to get regular updates on how are we doing, what's going well, where are areas that we need to work on, and especially as we're working on the budget, where do we need to strengthen either in personnel or other ways in technology or anything, and to really get a more ongoing state of the state of special education. I don't think we've really seen that quite in that way for the last few years now. Of course, we've had other things going on, but I think that will be of the interest to the board, but certainly also to the community. So I think that's something we hope to see definitely moving forward. And yeah, I'm excited to see this presentation at this point, but also recognizing that especially the flags, they're based on a number of years ago. And we may see something differently now that we're back into a more, can we call it normal school environment. And so things may change. But it's definitely an area that we're very glad that you're looking at. And and one other item is also, and I've mentioned this before, is that moving students out or remove supports as students make progress, and so that they can work and live more independently as they mature. So thank you for being here and sharing with us tonight. All right, that was the third of our presentations. So now we get on to the recommendations. There is one recommendation for a professional learning partnership. Mr. Hoffman.
So last month, you all supported us with our request for the PLP Upper Dublin Professional Service Agreement for this year, which is going to be helping us with our vision planning, our comprehensive plan vision work, and our administrative retreat. This is a request for next school year that will be supporting our professional learning for administrators, Portrait of a Graduate program, and participation in a summer leadership summit with other local administrators. The source for this would be general fund.
Yeah, and I think the Portrait of a Graduate program that's something that probably needs a little bit more explanation. That may be something for another presentation or at some point, but I think that is an effort to really say, what do we want an Upper Dublin graduate to look like? What are the criteria? How are we going to get there? How are students going to get there? And it's another part of the vision. Is that correct? Am I, Dr. Smith?
You got it. And really, this will be the result of some of the work of our comprehensive planning. And as we get a little bit further into that process, I hope that it will flow right into the Portrait of a Graduate and bringing together different stakeholders to talk about exactly what you just said. What does a graduate look like? And then maybe we have a portrait of an employee and other things to just make it all aligned together and to be able to help use it as I'll call it a funnel, or, that we look through each of our decisions as we're making decisions, whether it's curriculum resources or other things we may be recommending to you.
Right. So members of the committee, do you have questions? Members of the board, any questions? Mr. Warschauer.
I know it says administration. Who specifically participates in the PLP?
So this agreement specifically, a large bulk of it is the administrative team. So anybody in our Act 93 agreement who serves as an administrator in the district, both the operational side and the instructional side, will participate in that administrative series on the science of learning and leadership and what that looks like. We'll be able to send a few of our administrative team to the summit, and then the think tank will really be open beyond just administrators, though. We'll look for some other stakeholders to participate in that as well when we get to the Portrait of a Graduate.
Okay, can we move this on to the legislative? Yes, Dr. Thomas, yep. Okay, so we'll do that. And that gets us then to conferences. Mr. Hoffman?
One conference is a student club, FBLA, for the National Leadership Conference. Our students are continuing to progress well through that. competition, and then our advisor obviously goes with them. The other two, it's been a few years since we've had somebody attend, and we actually have two teachers attending the Keystone Technology Innovative Summit this summer. They select, you get nominated by a principal, and then there's a pretty rigorous selection process, and they select 100 educators from across the state to attend at, I'm forgetting the school, Shippensburg maybe, but they spend a week on campus with 100 other educators talking about technology, high yield practices, really reaching all students. And so it's a real honor. We have a kindergarten teacher from Maple Glen and Brad, our instructional technology coach for the district.
And are these all three of them, will they then have an opportunity to share what they have learned with the rest of their faculty?
Yes, particularly the KTI Summit.
Right. Members of the committee? Nice. Yes, Ms. Evans has a question.
This is a really fine point, but I think there's an item that's on both, on the conferences and on the student activities. I think it's that Future Business Leaders of America. It's on both. I assume it's one cost, though. Yeah, okay.
All right, so can we move this on to legislative? I see nods. Okay, we'll do that. That's the, hold on, conferences, and then student activities. Ms. Evans already looked ahead, right?
Yes, and the rest are just ongoing yearly annual trips for our students.
All right, any questions? No, then let's move then on to the legislative meeting agenda. And that gets us to item 7, public participation. If there's anybody who wants to address the board, please feel free to step up to microphone and state your name and your city of residence, or affirm that you are a resident or taxpayer.
I didn't start them yet, so good. Hi, I'm Dr. Joan Frizzell, recently retired from teaching in the School of Nursing and Health Sciences at LaSalle University. I live in Stewart Creek Farm, so when they talked about students with homelessness, hey, I understand. I spent a couple days trying to teach my courses off of my cell phone. So, really a challenging experience, and I was pleased at how Upper Dublin handled it for the students that I know. The other thing I have to say, which is not why I'm speaking, is I was very excited to hear about your new math program. I teach pharmacology. Students, the idea of having to do drug calculations on developing drugs, etc. We have a group of math phobics that just panic over why I have to have math questions in a pharmacology, pharmacotherapeutics exam. So maybe by the time those students get to the classes that I no longer teach, they won't be as terrified of all of those questions, because it really sounds like a good, interesting program. My reason for being here is something I've addressed before, and I did email someone on the board, and that's school safety. One of the things I notice coming in, whenever I've come in, nobody asks me when I'm coming to this meeting who I am, why am I here, what am I doing? Nobody keeps track of how I move around the building. Nobody makes sure I leave. And I think that's a real major safety concern for the students and the faculty and people who are in this building. The other thing that really concerns me is hearing from neighbors, friends about some physical altercations that occur in the schools. And one of the things I mentioned in the past was, do we have a module on teaching students anger management, how to calm yourself down when you're really angry, ways to negotiate with your classmate, somebody whom you're disagreeing with, but in terms of reconciliation, rather than sitting there fighting or getting into a shouting match. And I went through just about every document I could find on the school board page or on the school page, and I don't see any modules anywhere for health, history, or any class that offers those learning opportunities to students. And in today's society, looking at what's happening on college campuses and students not knowing how to have intelligent dialogue without attacking the individual seems to have been lost over time. And I really would like to ask this board and members of the school administration to look at programs that we can put into place so that when a student is in Upper Dublin, they know how to handle conflict, they know how to control to the best of their ability, their anger, and maybe when they get to college, they won't be fighting and challenging each other the way we're seeing on college campuses this week. College campuses have become kind of violent, and I feel like kids should have learned this when they were in their public schools, in middle school, high school, maybe even start in elementary school. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Are there other speakers?
I really always, we were kind of in a round circle or
Could you
something.
use the microphone, please?
Okay, I'm Jen Chaffetz, and I'm definitely a taxpayer. And so I was going to show you guys a video today of the fight that happened at the high school. If there are no objections, I'd like to do that. Want to make sure that I'm not doing something. I won't show it over here.
I don't think that's appropriate
No,
at
I
this
can't?
point. I mean,
Then
if
I'll email it
you
to
can
everybody.
certainly,
Yeah.
you're welcome to email it to us.
So echoing what Joan said. So a month ago, there was a massive fight in the high school, and we lost office hours. And a week ago, there was a boy that was unconscious, as I understand it, and had to be removed with medical professionals. Today, there were 2 fights. I watched a girl beat another girl in the face in the bathroom horrifically, to where I gasped, and my husband said, "What happened?" And I said, "You won't believe the video that I just got from our kids." Maybe a week ago, I know everybody here must know that there was a Pembroke middle schooler who was attacked by another kid with a Stanley, to the point where that child was taken to the hospital. So I'm nervous. My daughters can't use the bathrooms. Today's fight happened in the bathroom. They are nervous in the halls. We have a mental health dilemma with kids that have anxiety, panic disorders. And I can't imagine, and last week there was the gun, right? There was a false, maybe we're gonna have a violent event here. And I hear that these kids get suspended. And I hear that these are the same kids. And I have to, I'll say that I only know what I hear from my kids. I know what I see from the school. Today, the boys, their bloody knuckles that they're posting on Instagram, they're so proud of themselves. Today's fight was premeditated. Girl walks into the bathroom, somebody's going behind her, she's going shh, 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 and then she starts pummeling another girl in the bathroom. I just want to know what we're going to do about this. I live in like an affluent suburb of Philadelphia, and this is happening in my school. And this is happening regularly. There's another fight, Mom. There was another fight, Mom. We had another fight today, Mom. What is the recourse that our district has? How many times do you get suspended before you get expelled permanently? How many times after you get suspended do you get a different, more punitive consequence? I'm honestly nervous for my kids when they come to school. I have told my kids that they can't wear UGG slides because they can't run in those if they have to run. Isn't that sad? Like, I don't know what to tell them. I tell them not to go to the bathroom, so they go to the nurse's office. So my one daughter has logged 76 visits to the nurse because that's where she has to go to have a bio break. But I think that this district can do better. And I think we should stop allowing the tail to wag the dog here. And we should start enacting some policies that have substantive consequences for these kids that are repeat offenders.
Right. I'm not seeing anyone else come to the microphone, and we have not received any input online. So I'd like to close public participation and would ask if there's any comments from the administration and then from the board.
Thank you, Mrs. Sherbier. I will just, echo that certainly as a staff and administration, we are disheartened when our students act out, particularly physically. I would, however, though, say that we have been following board policy, our code of conduct. There are very careful considerations given in terms of consequences and that progression of what that looks like for students, as well as restorative pieces that are taken into account. I know Mr. Schultz and his team, along with Mr. Creamer, have been working very hard. I also did mention at the legislative meeting that a couple of different things that we are doing in the area of safety, one of them being having audits of all of our buildings done so that we can have recommendations for ways to increase some of our physical safety, along those particular lines. But I will continue to work with Mr. Schultz and his team to see if there are other things that, we could be doing. Thank you.
Any other comments? Ms. Evans?
One other thing you mentioned at the legislative meeting, Dr. Smith, is that we are bringing in-house some safety officer roles that we've previously contracted out, which I know you've spoken about, and certainly seems logical to me, would have a beneficial effect.
You're correct, Mrs. Evans.
Any other comments? We can move on to the information about the next meeting. Our next education meeting will be June 5th at 6 o'clock, most likely in this room. And I'd like to adjourn the meeting. We'll have a short break to rearrange, and then the policy meeting will follow shortly. Thanks and good night.